Welcome to this exclusive interview with Dr. John Demartini, a world-renowned human behaviour expert and polymath. In our interview, we'll be discussing conflict resolution, particularly as it pertains to the current crisis and conflict happening in the Middle East. I hope you get a lot of value out of the interview, gain some new insights and a new perspective on a unique and revolutionary approach to help you and the people you love and the people you know heal through this very difficult time in history. Good evening, I think, Dr. John. I believe you're in Bermuda at the moment. You're just giving a talk, giving your time to me just to have a quick chat before I get on a flight to go do a seminar. And I'm just super appreciative that you've taken this time just to answer a few questions that I have around this conflict that's happening in the Middle East, as I believe you have a unique perspective that isn't really being showcased at the moment. And I believe it could be extremely valuable to helping people move through this conflict and maybe start a healing process that hasn't really been attempted before. So thank you so much for coming on this call today.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
So
we had some fun logistically trying to organize it.
Yes, we did. It was like very, very quick this morning on my time, obviously this evening in your time. So yeah, it's amazing that we got on this so quickly, just obviously because we're in the hot seat of everything right now in the Middle East. A perfect opportunity to really get this information out now because obviously of all the different dialogues and narratives that are flooding social media at the moment and the media. So before I get into the nitty-gritty and ask you loads of very important questions, for people who don't know you, who might be watching this video and being introduced to you for the first time, can you tell them a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Well, fundamentally, I'm a researcher and educator in the field of human behavior. Next month will be 51 years I've been teaching and researching. And anything to do with human behavior, I'm fascinated by. Why do people do what they do? Why do they react the way they do? What is their motives? These kind of things. And helping people live more meaningful and productive lives, more extraordinary and inspired lives, more fulfilling lives is what I'm really dedicated to. And so that's it. I just pretty well teach, research, write, and travel around the world. I'm right now on my ship sailing from Bermuda to Nassau, Bahama. I'm out in the Atlantic Ocean. You probably see the curtains go back and forth a bit because we got out in the Atlantic. It's got a little bit of wave to it, not much. And I'm in my condominium here on the ship.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again, like I said, for joining and for sharing a little bit more about who you are and what you do. I've been doing your work since 2011, so it's about 12 years now that I've been one of your students and utilizing a lot of the techniques and tools that I've learned from you to help me effectively live a more purposeful life. So my objective, like I said, was to get you onto a chat with me to ask you some questions about the conflict in the Middle East. And I know I watched a video yesterday. I'm not sure when you did this video. I can't remember it, but you spoke about the conservation of peace and war. It was a very interesting video. I didn't get to finish the whole thing because I got busy with patients at work, but it was very interesting. I shared it on social media just to start introducing people to the work that you do. And I'm not sure if it was in that video or another one. You spoke about two different, actually, no, it was an interview that you did in South Africa in relation to helping Palestinians and Israelis in South Africa find common ground. And you spoke about your experience actually in Northern and Southern Ireland with the conflict that they had there. And not many people obviously would have seen that. So actually, I'm curious for you to actually share that particular experience, because that's not too dissimilar actually to what's going on in the Middle East. Very, coming from slightly different perspectives.
You mentioned two. You mentioned
so the Southern and Northern Ireland story, where you got a whole bunch of people in the room. I'm curious for you to share that because that actually is quite relevant to what's just happened over the last week and a half.
Right. I used to have not recently, but up until COVID, I had a television show in South Africa. and I was being hosted by a lovely lady. She was sort of asking me questions, and we had a show that was going on for quite a number of years, week to week. And one of the topics was on conflict and imperialism in South Africa, because they had the apartheid. And we got into a topic about the Middle East issue. And she was a journalist also, and she'd a wars correspondent kind of journalist. And so she coordinated 5 Israeli leaders and 3 Palestinian leaders to come into a very fine secured hotel in a private room. And she asked me to bring the method I developed on conflict resolution to the table, and just to see what would happen as a little experiment. And they had the media that's been working with that conflict for 14 years. And I walk in the room, and there's one side of a table with 3 people, one side with 5 people. If you put a knife down the center, it would have just stayed in the air. It was pretty tense. There's arch enemies across the table in the same room, which is quite interesting. And so as I'm about to get ready to speak, one of the Israeli women leaders put her hand up and said, "Dr. Demartini, do you believe in absolute evil?" And I said, "No, I don't believe that absolute statements and absolutisms are facts about human beings. If somebody used to say to Dr. Demartini and said, 'Are you always mean, never nice, always cruel, never kind, always negative, never positive?' I'd say no. If you said, 'Are you always positive, never negative, always kind, never cruel, always nice, never mean?' I'd say no. But if you ask me, am I sometimes nice, sometimes mean, sometimes kind, sometimes cruel, I would say, of course, I'm a human being. And if you support my values, I'm nice as a pussycat. You challenge my values, I'm mean as a tiger." So absolute labels are usually projections of subjective biases from past wounds that we have not seen the upsides to, that we project onto each other. So she said, "Do you believe in absolutive?" I said, "No." And says, "Well, I do." And I said, "Is it possible that 14 years of trying to negotiate a truce is blocked because of those perceptions?" And she just got quiet. And her lady who is translating and also mediating chuckled, because she thought, touche. And then I said, "So let me ask you a question. What specific trait, action, or inaction do you perceive an individual displaying or demonstrating when you believe that they're absolute evil?" And she said, "Intolerance." Now, in the biblical New Testament, there's a quote by Romans 2:1 that says, "That which you judge in others, beware, because you do the same things." And so I found that to be true in mediating and negotiating for people for many, many decades now. What we do is we are too proud to admit that what we see in them that we resent, we do the same thing, but we're ashamed of it. So we dissociate and go into pride to compensate for that. And they're reminding us of what we don't love about ourselves. And we don't want to admit it. So we just dissociate and go into a fantasy about who we are and create a false persona and then say, "I would never do that." And this lady was doing that. And so I said, "So intolerance." And then I said, "So let's go to a moment when you perceive yourself displaying and demonstrating intolerance." And she says, "I'm never intolerant. I'm very tolerant. I would never be that way. Everybody knows I would never do that." Whenever you hear absolute language, you know there's lying and subjective interpretations inside your own head. So I then humbled myself, because if I pride myself, they'll cut me down. If I humble myself, they'll lift me up. And I said, "Well, I'm certainly intolerant. When I go to a restaurant, I don't get what I've ordered, I'm intolerant. When I go to the airline and they don't have my seat the way I wanted, I get intolerant." And I started listing all the places I was intolerant to open up the door for her to look at maybe where she was intolerant. So finally she said, "Well, in that case, yes, I've been intolerant of my husband. I've been intolerant of this." And I said, "Let's start listing them out until the quantity is equal to the gentleman that you're judging." She said, "Well, I could never do that." And I said, let's take a look. Let's just go. And then she said, "I've been intolerant of my kids and been ultimatums and gave them ultimatums and threatened them when they don't do things that I want." I've done it with my husband a few times. I've done it with my siblings. I've done it with some friends that I've disowned, and she started owning it. And then all of a sudden we had 32 examples of where she was intolerant and where it was similar or the same to what she was judging this man to be, because she had a specific thing in mind when he did it. And all of a sudden, the second she got equilibrium and saw that the quantity and quality was the same as what she was judging, she got a tear in her eye, which meant that she took herself off the pedestal and took him out of the pit, leveled the playing field, had a tear, which is a confirmation of authenticity, because we really want to love people. And when we don't, when we're judging, we're disowning parts and having an emptiness feeling, and then we defend ourselves to try to not efface the moral hypocrisies that we're living. So she humbled herself. She cried. She got makeup kind of run. And she went, whoa, I wasn't expecting that. And of course, the mediator is chuckling because she's going, boy, that was slick. You got her to admit something that I've been trying to do, but she couldn't do it. Then I said, okay, so now that we've identified it, let's go to a moment where and when you perceive this individual that you believe is intolerant, which is the guy across the table. Go to a moment when you actually perceived it, not hearsay, but you actually perceived it live. Yes. Okay, go to that moment. In that moment, how did it benefit you? What's the upsides, benefit, advantages, and services it provided you? She goes, well, it didn't. How can you make something evil good? I said, well, wait a minute now. You just got through identifying you've done that. Are you saying you're absolute evil? Well, no, because the way I do it is, well, no. Then she stopped. She goes, no, I've done the same thing. I said, exactly. So now the question is what's the benefit? You did it and it must serve, and you love your kids and you still did it to your kids, and you love your husband, you still did it to your husband. So how does that benefit you when he did that? I don't know. I can't see it. Well, let's look again, because you said that in 3 seconds to 2 seconds and 1 second, you gave up on looking, which means you didn't really look very strong. Let's go and dig. And then I realized that she was stumped. So I said, could it be this? Could it be this? Could it be this? And possible ones, because I've done a lot of mediation of conflict and I know some patterns. And I said, what were you doing before this moment that he did this? She says, well, I was a mother raising kids. Were you a career woman? No. Were you in business? No. You were at home raising 2 kids. Yes. I said, and when he did this, what did it catalyze you to do? Well, I started getting involved in a group, and I started to reading up on things, and I started to learn. And I said, did your kids become more independent because you weren't giving as much attention and didn't stop smothering your kids and got to give them some more attention? She goes, actually, yes. Did you thank this person for helping your kids become more independent and not be smothered by a helicopter mom? She goes, never thought about that. But yes, that's a benefit to my kids. They became more interested in the world and became more independent and started doing things on their own. Great. What's another benefit that came out of it? I said, you said you were not a career woman. Did you now get involved in a cause and start to have influence and people? So socially, did you grow? She goes, yes, I did. I got involved in a movement and I started having people follow me. What else? I went back to school. So this guy catalyzed you, go back to school and get a degree. I did. And then I started organizing my thing and I started speaking it. So you're now a speaker. You're known around the world. You know presidents and prime ministers and media, and you've reached millions of people with your message now. And you got a lot of influence. If he had not been in your life doing that action, would you have reached that? She goes, probably not. I can't prove it one way, but probably not. I said, did you give him any credit for your book royalties? Because you wrote a book on the conflict and he's mentioned all through there. Did you give him a cut out of the book deal? And he goes, I didn't. So you mean you leveraged an opportunity out of the guy because of his actions and you're making a living out of it, getting notoriety of it, getting all these things, and he's not even being thanked for what he's contributed? She goes, I never even wrapped my head around thinking it that way. What else is a benefit? Well, I've met amazing people. And I've been involved in changing rules and laws and all kind of things. And I've saved people's lives. And I said, all of those came from that one action that guy did. She goes, I never, ever saw that. And I just kept making her look at what were the upsides in that moment and from that moment forward. And we did 39 benefits until she got tears in her eyes. Once the benefits equal the drawbacks, the judgment of absolutity dissolved away. and she just started to cry. And she literally grabbed some Kleenex and got quiet, covered her face, and couldn't stop herself from having tears. Now the whole room is watching this, and they're doing the same exercise that I'm making her go through on whoever they're upset with. So she asked if she could excuse herself because I kept her in there for almost 3 hours and she wanted to go and relieve her bladder. So she went down to the bathroom. When she did that, the guy came up to me and he said, Dr. Demartini, I am amazed at what just happened in this morning. When I walked in here, there was a lot of anger, a lot of tension. And right now, what you just took that lady through and us through without you even realizing it, I'm not angry at that lady right now because everything that I was judging her for, I found in myself, like you said, and I just have difficulty wanting to be upset with her. And now I'm not even upset with me or her. And he says, I could swear she was talking about me. And I said, she was. She goes, I thought that. But that was really humbling to hear. And I could hear it for the first time. This has been really amazing few hours. And we came back and we worked some more. And when they were through, not only did they shake hands, but they went around and gave each other a hug, which is unheard of, and said, thank them for the lesson. And they thanked me. I hugged them all. The mediator said, you did more at 7 hours than I did in 14 years. And because you made them accountable and held them accountable that nobody seemed to be able to do. They're always coming from a right and wrong moral hypocrisy position and keeping black and white and talking about their wounds. And they think mediation is if you come on my side, we'll have peace. And if you come on my side, we'll have peace. And that's never going to get peace. That's going to end up just creating rightness, and rightness doesn't get love. Because that's the amygdala, and you got to go beyond your amygdala. Anyway, that changed it. So 3 months later, after that day, I came back, and the lady from Israel asked me to come on her radio show. She's got a big following, and she's in a radio center that's surrounded by guards and wire fences and stuff like that because they'd like to bomb and threaten the place all the time. So she had me come on her show, and I was impressed because I told her in that first day, I said, your leadership came from that. Are you really committed to mediating a thing? Or are you just committed to being famous with your group of angry people? Because if you're really here to mediate, let's mediate. If you're here to just get a bunch of following, then be honest with yourself so you know what your real intention is and don't lie to yourself. And that really nailed it. That's when she went to tears. And so she went on and shared that entire thing to people in Israel and throughout different parts of the world where there's Jewish followers. And she humbled herself. Now, that had some people melt and soften, had other people angry. Then you're not part of our cause anymore. And they want to stay angry because they want to stay in wounded world. But that was just what's possible for two people to go back from their amygdala, where they subjectively interpret things and get extremely biased in order to survive, to capture prey when you need adrenaline to really distort things to get enough adrenaline to capture prey or to avoid predator mentality. And so survival is going to keep you in that state of being right. But love is going to get you to a place where you can communicate and start having dialogue and respect. So until you can walk in somebody's moccasins and see that what you see in them is inside you, that's not likely to do. And we want to judge people and point our finger, but I assure you that both sides of this equation, if they stopped and were willing to do that, could own where they've done everything that the other ones has done in their life. And I've been doing this for 4 decades, and I'm certain that I've taken people of all different types of things, and that's it when they look, even on a collective scale. Groups get only angry on a collective scale to the same things that they're repressing in their own life about themselves. And we only get defensive as a protection to protect our fragile pseudo ego, our false ego, from being vulnerable, because we don't want to lose our pride. That's why we cover up our face when we're ashamed, and we show off our face from our pride. We don't want to lose that. So we protect ourselves and buffer ourselves from the reality of who we are. So that's the Israeli Palestinian adventure that time. Then we had a situation where I was doing the Breakthrough Experience, which is my signature program in Ireland, in Dublin. And there was a gentleman from the president's White House. They call it the little greenhouse there, the little leprechaun house in Dublin. And he came and he watched me work through and take about 82 people, I think we had 82 people attending, and take each one of them through conflicts in their life and issues in their life that they were judging. And we one by one knocked them out during this weekend. And it was a long night. I went to like 2 a.m. working and dissolving stuff, resentments about people in their life, whatever, mom, dads, ex-wives, ex-husbands, whatever it might be, just to show them how to mediate and dissolve. And when he got through, he came up to me and said, if I was to get you a meeting with the president here in Ireland, would you be willing to come and show him this work and see if we can't put a pilot together on this? I said, absolutely. So I came back 3 months later and I met with the president, Mary McAleese and Mark McAleese, her husband, there at the house in the little tea room. And we had a discussion and he shared what he experienced in the program. And then I explained what was going on and they put together a pilot study. So the following time I came there, I went up to Belfast from Dublin. We drove up, got there really early in the morning, left at 4 a.m. And they put 3 mothers and wives in a room with 3 of the killers who killed their husbands and sons and husbands. Now, the people that came in, the 3 women who had no husbands or son, were on the side near the exit, and the other one were in a secluded, secured area. And these are the prisoners who actually killed their family, killed their husbands and sons. So they're in the same room. So the same thing, and you walk in, it was a little bit tense. We had some people from the government. We had some people from the press. We had 2 of my facilitators to assist me for time purposes. We had some Catholic people, Christian Catholic people, and a psychologist who brought the women. The psychologist was keeping them victims. And one of the things that Mary McAleese said is this victim mentality model is not working. It's keeping people going from generation to generation angry. So we need a new model. So let's see what you got. So we did this Demartini method, which is my method on conflict resolution, and we held people accountable with a facilitator and myself. I did the one that had the son and the husband killed, and the other one did one that just lost their husbands. And we just sat methodically, did it, and we went back and forth between the killers and the people that were killed, right, family. And we mediated the process and wrote down what it is that they judge, where they do it, what's the benefits. What's the benefit of when they've done it to dissolve the shame and guilt? Where does this individual do the opposite? At the moment they did it, who's doing the opposite? A bunch of series of questions that hold people accountable. And if they had done the fantasy, what you hope they'd have done would have been the drawback, crack the fantasies, because you can never appreciate people when you compare them to a fantasy. We worked on that till 1 o'clock in the afternoon, from 8 to 1. So 5 hours. The energy was already different. People were now dialoguing and talking. When they started, I was the only one speaking. And they're talking. We went to lunch, and they had the prisoners were there with their lunch brought to them. The other ones got to go out to lunch, and came back an hour later. And then I have a grief process on how to dissolve grief over the death of people. And I've taken 5,000 people through this process, and I've got facilitators by the thousands out doing it around the world. And what's interesting is I had the lady who had the son and the husband do the grief process there in front of the entire room. And it took about hour and 45 minutes, hour and 40 minutes, something like that. And we finished the process. And that's, so you never grieve the loss of all parts of a person, individual. You only grieve the parts that you infatuated with. You only fear or grieve the loss of that which you were infatuated with, never the parts you hated. If you ask people, I've asked thousands of people that have had deaths, if you were to write down everything that they're missing in the death, I'm grieving the loss of this. It's always the traits they admired. They don't ever say, I miss their screaming at me. I miss their bad gas. I miss the way they eat like a monster. The way they are aggressive sometimes. I don't miss, they don't miss the over drinking. They only miss the things like their hugs, their conversations, their support, their funniness, their humility, their smile, their lovemaking. They never miss the parts that they despise. You relieve of those, you're grieved the loss of the things you infatuate with. So I had her itemize the things that she admired and now missed. I had her go in and find out who is now providing it in her life, found out what was the drawbacks when they did do it so they could crack the fantasy, infatuation, and the benefits of the new people doing it until it was neutralized an hour and 40 minutes. When she's through, she's not grieving. She's not angry. She's feeling the presence of her son and husband, and she's in tears of gratitude. I know it's hard to believe. Whoever's listening to this, it's hard to believe, but I guarantee you, I can guarantee I've done this on television. I've done this in Christchurch earthquake. I've done this as Ishimaki earthquake and tsunami in Japan, the earthquake in Japan in 2016. I've done this and brought in my teams, and we do this and we dissolve grief and loss and post-traumatic stress and all kind of stuff. And so when we got through, we asked, who here reminds you of your son and your husband? And she picked a guy and a younger guy to represent him, and shared her love and appreciation, because the truth was her husband was aggressive. Her son was getting in trouble. He was doing drugs and getting stoned and getting drunk and getting in trouble. And she was living in a stressful environment. And sometimes the father was aggressive. And after they did, she's now grieving the loss of the things she liked, but she forgot all those other things. And she's now with a new man, has a new life, a higher quality life. She's sort of a celebrity because everybody knows about her because she was on the news. And she's now realizing this was a step forward, not a backward step. So she goes up unannounced, unexpected. Nobody asked her to do it. Walked over to the guy that killed her son and husband, put her arms around the guy. And I'm telling you, there was not one dry eye in that room. Everybody was snotting. And the guy, Gene, who was the one that worked for the president, was in his hand. He put his hands up in the air and he goes, oh my God, this is what the country needs. It needs to learn how to be accountable and own its stuff and dissolve its baggage instead of just perpetuating it generation after generation. Multi-generational post-traumatic stress, epigenetic storage in our hippocampus of these bits and baggages that we carry around. And then it keeps creating the same impulses and instincts in the next generation. So we blew everybody's mind. I was even blown. I didn't expect that kind of result myself. Even though I know I do this, I thought this is a really time crunched type of setting, but we did it. We're driving back to Dublin and we say goodbye. And I come back 3 months later on my ship. We sail in. So Martin and Mary McAleese come on the ship, and the ambassador comes on and Gene comes on, and we talk about it. And I said, so what's the result? And said, we got a problem in politics. So what is it? The religious organization said that not once did I mention Jesus. And if we don't have Jesus in the equation, saving people from these problems, we can't have that in the country because we're a Christian country. And I was going, oh my God, here's politics. And then the psychologist said, she was afraid she was going to lose business. And I went over to her before I left. I said, by the way, I'll be glad to train anybody in your team and you can take this and run with it. I don't need to do this. I'm not attached to that. I just want the material. You can take it and run with it. I gave her the opportunity to take it and run because she was frightened about losing control over people she kept victims. So there's a lot of old models out there, and people are promoting old models, and they're also promoting moral hypocrisies and also religious dogma that's keeping people from going to the next level of their awareness. So that's why I said that.
Thank you so much for sharing those two examples, because truthfully, they are so relevant to exactly what's happening in the Middle East, obviously on a macro scale, in comparison to, those experiences that you spoke about in South Africa and obviously in Ireland. And something that I was thinking about, and we'll have to do this relatively quickly so I don't miss my flight, but one of the things that I've been thinking about as I've been observing this experience, I'm a Jewish person. I have people in Israel who thankfully have not been impacted in that way. But Jewish people globally are obviously impacted by this whole experience, as are Arabs, Muslims, Islamic people, Palestinians, etc., around the world. And I was able to kind of move through a lot of my emotion through a lot of the work that I've done over the years. My brain just knows how to automatically kind of neutralize it without me having to do it all the time. And I'm now at a position where I can look at it more objectively. And something that I guess realized or became aware of is that because I've been bullied as a kid and I understand this dynamic so well, and I've worked through this using a lot of the work that I've learned from you, it just looked like two kids in a playground, like throwing sand at each other. And I know that's, really simplifying a very complex and highly emotionally charged situation. But that's what it looks like to me. It looks like it's not really about the land per se. It's not necessarily around all the stuff that I think is more surface level. I think it boils down more to the religious history amongst these two different different organizations or these two different cultures where they're both vying for love and both vying for attention and both vying for recognition in the eyes of Father, God, or whoever they believe and they're connected to. So I just wanted to check in with you and see whether there's some accuracy to my observation based on what you understand about the conflict. Just very quickly, if you
Well,
can.
we have in our body, in our physiology, the sympathetic nervous system for fight or flight, and the parasympathetic nervous system for rest and digest. The parasympathetic is for anabolic building, and the sympathetic is for catabolic destroying. And they reduce or oxidize, alkalinize or acidify. And so we have building and destroying going on in our body. We have mitosis, apoptosis. We have build and destroy in our body constantly. At the subatomic levels, we have build and destroy. Out of the quantum vacuum, we've got emergence and submergence, particles and antiparticles, pairs of opposites. At the atomic levels, we have recombination and ionization. At the molecular level, we've got SN1 and SN2 and E1 and E2 chemical reactions. If we look very carefully at the cell level, we've got emergence, mitosis, apoptosis. Inside the cell, we've got fibers being formed and deformed and remodeling and plasticity. At larger structures, we have the plasticity of the bones and muscles and everything else. Our body is constantly adapting with build and destroy. And if you look very carefully, you have what is called a licensing effect. Every time you go into pride and build yourself up, you give yourself permission to do something that you're ashamed of to humble you, to get you back into homeostasis. And we have a homeostatic mechanism to bring those two peace and wars, build and destroy systems together in a perfect balance for remodeling our world to adapt to a changing astronomical experience. So we sometimes get caught in the idea one's bad and one's good, and this separates the inseparables, divides the indivisibles, labels the unlabellables, names the ineffatables, polarizes the unpolarizables. And the second you separate them and label one good and bad, you've just now got the conflict. And there's a law of heuristic escalation. The moment you get one, you get the other. And law of heuristic escalation says anybody with an ideology that promotes an ideology will run into somebody with an equal and opposite ideology to make sure that they get a balance of support and challenge, peace and war. It's called the law of the one to many. So I look at that and I see it as they escalate. As the more you get angry, the more you rub it in, and the more you get it, the more you escalate it, the more the opposite's going to escalate. And the law of heuristic escalation is just going to escalate, and destroy until people get humbled. So that's the lesson. So ultimately, people will get a lesson and they'll learn from it in history. Or maybe they'll repeat the lesson. Depends on whether they gain wisdom or they hold on to their wounds. And if you're basically anything you're not thankful for is your wound, and anything you're grateful for is your lesson, and you move forward. You have wisdom. And it was Empedocles, the philosopher, Greek philosopher, way back in 5th, 6th century. He said there's love and strife. And love is the integration of all pairs of opposites, and strife is the dissipation of those two. So we can sit there and ask questions that integrate and unify us, or we can ask questions that divide us. One will cause perpetuation of it, and the more we perpetuate it, we'll create peace in other forms. I think we had some thousands of people at the Wailing Wall recently, of Jewish people gathering together there. So they don't normally do that unless there's conflict on it. So now they grow and they get in peace and they chant and they work to create peace to counterbalance the war. And at the same time, when there was a peace in the Vietnam War, when they went to war, there's the peace movement. So there's a global peace index that measures peace and war across the world in 99.7% of all the world's population. And it shows every year after year, it's always balancing. And the borders between countries are constantly changing through history. Over the last 1,000 years, if you look at Europe, you will see massive changes of borders going on all the time, nonstop. There's not one period that's not changing borders. So peace and war has been conserved through time and space, changing form. And it's there to teach human beings how to love and how to integrate the pairs of opposites over time. And any part we're not able to love, we're going to learn that lesson until we love it. So I don't see it as this terrible thing. I see it as some people are a little slower in learning the lesson of love. And they got what love is, and love is learning how to have sustainable, fair exchange. Now we're not
Correct.
having sustainable, fair exchange. That's what the issue is about. If they would just go to sustainable, fair exchange and realize what they're judging in others is pointing the fingers back at themselves on both sides, we'd end up
Hmm.
having, because most people from Palestine aren't upset with the Israelis, and most people from Israel is not upset with the Palestinians. It's a small fraction, but that's all it takes to initiate these reactions.
100% agree. And something that I have also observed is, yeah, which is kind of, yeah, connects to what you were just saying. Whoever's got the issue on the one side has the same issue on the other side. They're just looking at it through a different lens, but it's the same problem. Just the form looks different. And it's pretty obvious when you're not emotionally invested to look at each side of the equation and go, oh, they've got the same issue that they have, and they've got the same issue that they have. And they're just as radicalized as they are, and they just as this as that. And like for a Jewish person to be talking about this, I'm probably going to be challenged tremendously for this because it can look like I'm anti-Jewish or anti-Israel or that kind of stuff, which I'm not. But I can just see things because I've been able to emotionally stand away from the situation, look at it from a more neutral point of view. And that's mainly the reason why I wanted to get you on and interview you so we could get some clarification from an expert in this field. Um, to help confirm and help people understand at the same time that this is really what's going on under the surface. So just before I go and let you go because it's late at night on the ship at the moment, um, what is the best way for people who aren't familiar with your work, who may be interested based on listening to you and our chat today? What's the best way for them to get access to the work that you do?
The easiest way to do it is simply go to drdemartini.com. And on there, I think if you just type my name, Dr. Demartini or Demartini or Dr. John Demartini, you'll find the website. And on there it's an educational website. You could probably spend the rest of your life just reading what's on there, watching what's on there. It's a lot of stuff, thousands of interviews and all kind of stuff. So yeah, they can just go there if they want to go and start to find out who I am and what I'm up to. Because I'm just all I do is teach, research, write, and travel the world, and that's my main objective, and try to help people do more masterful and live a more masterful and inspired life, because I think that's what we all kind of want inside.
Fantastic. And just one last question, just to finish off. Do you believe, based on your experience, and I think you've already answered this to some degree, but do you believe, based on all the experiences that you've had teaching this for decades, that if people were able just to take this on as a tool and a strategy to work through their conflicts and work through their wounds, that it could, down the line, maybe not in my generation or my children's generation, but eventually down the line, could potentially find some neutrality in this conflict?
Well, there's a social structure, and the social structure has the CEO, let's say, at the top, and the workers at the bottom. And then you got a president or a prime minister at the top, or a monarch or something at the top, and then down you got the serfs, right? The people that are doing the basic stuff. You have to have a social. You can't have everybody a CEO. You can't have everybody being the leader. So not everybody's going to live in their executive center and be objective. You're going to have all different scales from objectivity down to subjectivity and bias. And the truth has never been in the hands of the masses. It's only been in the heart of the masters. And there's a master in everyone. And all they got to do is learn to ask questions that open their heart to wake up their master, and they can be the objective one. And then through exemplification, they can lead other people to do the same. So I don't try to go and fix the world. I don't see it screwed up even. I see a nice pair of opposites going on in the world. I see there's a hidden order, and it's teaching people. We're all learning how to be authentic. Every sign and symptom in our body, every sign and symptom in our psychology, every sign and symptom in our sociology, even in our business, is a feedback mechanism to guide us back to authenticity. And if we get cocky and self-righteous, pride before the fall. If we get humble, we get lifted. Nature's trying to bring us back in the center where we have equanimity within this and ourself, which is true spirituality, and equity between ourselves and others. It's all trying to teach us. Some of us are a little slow in learning, that's all. We have to bang our head against the wall a few more times before we get that lesson.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that, Dr. John. I really appreciate you giving us your insight, your experience, your perspective on conflict and how to work through it and how to navigate through it, and also to really point out that there is no there is no real good or bad. There's just constant evolution happening and moving all the time. So thank you so much for giving me your time. I got to get going to catch my flight, otherwise I'm going to miss my seminar. Um, but I will be sharing this probably within the next 24 hours. And uh, yeah, again, thank you so much for giving us your time.
Yeah, I'd love to see get a copy. So thank you. Thank you very
Of
much.
course. Of course. Thanks, John.